This podcast episode contains discussions of personal trauma, mental health issues, and suicidal themes. These topics may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. If you or someone you know is struggling, please seek support from your Employee Assistance Program, 13 Yarn, or Lifeline Australia on 131114. Warami, and welcome to the Training and Support Unit's Jumbana podcast series, where we explore the stories, insights, and culture that shape our working world. I'm your host, Jamie Carpenter. I'm a Darug woman living and working on beautiful Yuin country. I'd like to start by acknowledging the rich cultural heritage and ongoing connections of Aboriginal people to the lands and waters across New South Wales. I recognise their continuous connection to country, culture, and community, and honour the history and traditions that have been woven into the fabric of this land for thousands of generations. Today, I'm joined by Aunty Bernice Hookey, a proud Waanyi and Motorwarri woman. Aunty Bernice is the founder of MZB Empowerment. She is a passionate mum, a cycle breaker, author, mentor, and difference maker who is on a healing journey to overcome intergenerational trauma and create a legacy of empowering Indigenous leadership, especially that inherent in First Nations women and their families. She is a multi-award winner, recognised for national and international excellence for First Nations leadership, and fellow of the prestigious Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Aunty Ber.
Thank you for having me, beautiful Jamie. I'm truly humbled and excited.
It's so lovely to be able to share some time with you today and talk about culture and how we kind of adapt that to while we're working in a Western world, because I think it's a really important topic, but it's also a really tricky thing to maneuver sometimes.
Yes, it absolutely is. And it's really important how we take that moment to step back and deeply listen to the environment and the surroundings around us, to our spirit, to our ancestors that have walked before us, and knowing that with the work that we do in this Western model is a guide. It's not something that we should be feeling that our ways of working is any less inclusive in that.
So I think to start off, can you share a story with me about a time when your culture values positively influenced a workplace when you were working in a Western world?
Showing up as a proud Waanyi and Motorwarri woman, that there in itself is my cultural values to be able to influence that in my work, is that I am proud of my ancestral roots and lineage from where my people have walked before and placed a footprint around Australia in. And the power in that is our values are now, I do notice it quite a bit in the Western model, is being embedded. Like, it really truly is an empowerment story of how our cultural values can positively influence those in a Western model.
I guess we're very lucky that we have such an amazingly strong, powerful heritage, and we have ancestors that have shared this journey of all of these amazing things. But what kind of strengths can we draw from that heritage that helps us navigate and succeed in that Western world?
It can come across as complex and sensitive, but we also must remember that as much as we know it is sad, our ancestry lineage did not have the support and help before us, that today, with the help and support to keep our history alive, is all about how we draw our strength from that. And that's why it's so important, be it education and health, be it education in education, to raise our voices so that it amplifies such a ripple effect out there, to travel in the winds, to travel in the riverways that we are sitting beside, because our people have navigated through these river streams and walked this country even before today's ways of technology and infrastructure have been introduced.
And I like that you talked about that walking, walking alongside, I guess, walking the way, because that's primarily with the families that we work with, in a health model. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to just diagnose and give them a solution and send them on their way. We're here to share with them and to walk their journey with them, to provide them that support and that guidance and that encouragement. So I really do think that having that background of that amazing knowledge and learning from our ancestors guides us to do that really well.
Absolutely. It sure does guide us. And one thing I have learned in my journey of stepping into that as well is when we can draw strength from pain and trauma, rather than looking at it through the lens of it's a weak point or vulnerability in the vulnerable state that we can be deemed, or the perception of it, it's to draw on that. Someone's pain may not be pretty, so to speak, but it's to draw from that and find those, navigate through it to find the solutions in it. Otherwise, we will drown in our own sorrow. And as you know, the rate of the dreaded S, suicide, chronic illnesses that are put upon that our people are dying at such a young age. And it is such a honor when you do read about elders making it past 60 years of age, 70, 80, 90, celebrating those milestones. That's where we need to draw our strength from, those elders, to keep those legacies alive and the lineage of those legacies alive to succeed in our work environment today.
And I guess, looking at, I think that that's a perspective that a lot of people miss. We talk about the idea of trauma-informed care, and that we take, or we acknowledge that people have lived trauma, and how, we can work through to support them through that. But, utilizing trauma and seeing it as a strength-based thing, the things that we go through, although can be terrible and horrific, actually shape the being that we can be, and they create that power behind us, if we can tap into it correctly, to become a stronger and more connected person.
A motto of mine I share in my business is we grow through what we go through. And to be able to look at trauma as more of a dialogue around how we heal rather than how we cause further harm to one another can help how we support each other and be there for each other. There's absolutely no room in our mental state of mind to keep putting each other down. It's such an important aspect in, yes, there are things that you may not agree on in your personal part of the world or your professional part of the world, but it's also important to understand the understanding around how you'd like to be treated, and be kind. Always throw that in the mix, because mental health and the well-being of particularly Aboriginal and Indigenous Australians is a core factor in whether it's in domestic violence, whether it's in those that are going through family members imprisoned. You could be sitting next to old mate at the bus stop and you just don't know what they've been through. And it shouldn't have to be that it's defined where it's you're a product of the circumstances, because you can get that support to help you so that you are not always stereotyped to be that product of those circumstances.
And I guess it's really true that we don't know what other people have been through. We don't know what their journey is. And for our listeners that are working in the AMOS and BSF and working with, Aboriginal maternal infant health services, they're in such a unique and special space where they can actually learn, like, not only support and help with health outcomes for babies and for young people, but they can actually learn from these people and take that knowledge to actually assist their journey into learning and understanding of culture.
And that's that everyday learning. Like you said, you're sitting down with Auntie there even if she is a mum of one, but she's also a mum of her extended family members, so that part of that is how you're able to build on your skills to how she's navigated through to supporting her family members, family, and her community, so that it and nanas and grandmothers, and to support how when you're learning off each other, it's not because you're better than someone else as well. It's also to do with how you can improve, how you can better serve yourself as an individual so that you can serve your community in a positive way.
And I know I'm going on a little bit of an offshoot, but I was just thinking about that, talking about aunties and connections and how, I guess it's really important to also acknowledge within this that the Western ways of acknowledging what a family unit is quite different to what Aboriginal people acknowledge as a family unit. People that are aunties, like might be direct aunties, will actually be our mothers. We have more than one mother. And, so maybe can you talk a little bit about that? How does that work when you've got, like, how does that Aboriginal concept of family work?
Being humbled here to speak on a podcast that's going to reach many people all across Australia. We all come from different nations where we draw strength from. But one thing we do draw back to is the matriarchal power within the the mothers, the grandmothers that are there to carry the burden, carry the weight of what goes on in their families, in their communities. But these are conversations that need to be had where taking that step back into drawing strength from your heritage or your lineage is to talk to your elders and in being in that circle of a sacred women's business. And it's a discerning thing to talk about it because it is sacred women's business, but it's everybody's business today, so that it reduces that pain and suffering around trauma build-up and the practices where you're breaking down those barriers when you have a better understanding of what your sister is going through, what your mum is going through, what your auntie is going through, or what us as women are going through. Like the weight of what we're carrying is not just that physical presence of it. We still carry the presence of the spirit of our mums and then their mums and then the mums of their mums. So like they say, it's about 8,000 or something in that lineage. So imagine if there is friction or there's that fracture around how they supported themselves. Yes, that will impact you, but that's where being a cycle breaker in that is really knowing who you are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess the guys that are working in AMOS and BSF are really lucky that they have this great dynamic of Aboriginal health workers working alongside nurses and like child and family nurses and midwives and OTs and speech therapists and social workers, so that they can actually learn from each other and understand that journey of our Aboriginal clients going through.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
that's also the process I understand now as I delve more into it. It's not particularly because of what the Western model has implemented for us to take on, but that's where our practices of strength come into play with that Western model. So it complements how we can support, because you are going to come across diversity no matter what.
And that brings me straight to my next question, which is interesting. So how can we balance the expectations of our workplaces, so our mainstream workplaces, with our need to kind of maintain that in cultural integrity? How can we do that?
We have to be okay to talk openly about the harms that have happened to us. It's not easy, I know that. Uh, but it is that taking those small steps in that. Like they say, from small things, big things grow. But in this, in a health space, it's taking those small conversations where it has a bigger impact to support our younger generations. our generations that are older than me, our generations that are still finding their identity through all of this. And it is the connection to your roots to how you decide on that process for diversity to be that practice in your values. Otherwise, if we get lost, then we lose our way completely.
Talking about that, I guess that connection to roots and being able to maintain that, that's a tricky thing in itself. So how can we kind of do that where we can maintain our professional integrity and be able to do the job that we need to do, but be able to stay that connection to those roots and to be able to cling to those and to hold those dearly to us?
It comes back to when you may hear the talk of cultural load versus colonial load.
Yes.
It's not always our responsibility on that professional integrity side. Yes, it is our responsibility being in a role to serve a community, but to empower, to uplift that cultural integrity. That's where it's important when we talk about that colonial load, when you're working in those spaces or the industries or the sectors you're working in, to come back to the learning where they're learning. And that's why when we talk about acknowledgement of country, or when we talk about addressing the concerns around why we need to bring up these historical harms to take on our role, it's not about walking in our footsteps, but it's about understanding so that the cultural integrity in us is all about the business to be working in a professional space so that the non-Indigenous people have a better understanding. And I mean, we can say that till we're blue in the face, have a better understanding. But like we talk about, every day is a learning day, and we still need to keep learning on that so that cultural integrity is respected for the professional integrity to be carried out.
Can you talk a little bit, because you'd mentioned about cultural load and colonial load. For those people that don't understand those concepts, can you just give like a little understanding of what the difference is between a cultural load and a colonial load?
Cultural load is, I know in some parts of Australia where I've talked in, they talk about why is it our responsibility to keep telling white people how we educate versus colonial load. It's not so much it's the colonial load on us to be called as a speaker at a NAIDOC event. That's a colonial load. The colonial Western way of what practices or principles within that workplace is to be carried out, that's actually, well, in my opinion, deemed as a colonial load, because it should not be put on us to be always standing up there to talk about it. That's where I believe the importance of allyship is brought into this as a strength for the Western model to be able to capture it in that way so that we can navigate to reduce the harm, reduce the systemic racism, reduce the systemic institutions from always making decisions about us without us.
Yeah. So I kind of, to sum up, I guess that colonial load, I guess, is the tasks and the duties that are put upon us by mainstream services. For example, there is some circumstances where people believe that only Aboriginal people should do an acknowledgement in their workplace. Whereas actually it should be the non-Indigenous people acknowledging that stuff. So that's something that can be put on us. But a cultural load is more about the load that we get and the stress of working within our communities and supporting our people and supporting each other as Aboriginal workforce, because that's a whole separate thing.
Yes, it is. It is a whole separate thing. And like even when we have major events, the welcome to country is to talk about it's not to talk about in a way where you want to sound like a cracked record. It's talking about you're in the space of where my Aboriginal family ancestors had walked before me. Now we're here to respect this space so that we're still supporting each other, because we are, of course, going to live in a black and white world always. It's ever evolving around that, but it's one of those things where knowing the history of that country that you are working, living, playing, uh, whatever it is that you'd like to do, from a hobby perspective even. Do you even know that when you go and decide to start a hobby down by the creek, that is there a historical story to that?
What kind of advice would you give to an Aboriginal person who's working in a health system on how that they can maintain their cultural identity while they're working in this kind of Western model? What kind of advice can we give them?
As much as we want to get angry and peed off about the way the Western model and the Western systems are, the best advice I can give you is to maintain your cultural integrity in a way where it connects you back to your people. We have a superpower, I will say, in our matriarchal lineage, but it's also not always the onus is our responsibility. And this is where I'm talking about that colonial load. That's not always on us to be maintaining that within the workplace that we're working in.
So I guess that definitely brings me to my next question, which is how can organisations better support Aboriginal employees to maintain their cultural identity and connection in the workplace?
Simply being respectful and having uncomfortable, open communication conversations. And when I say uncomfortable conversations, I say that with heart, because if we don't unpack those uncomfortable questions, we will forever be in the shoulda, coulda, woulda mode, or you build up anger. You be angry, and angry is not an energy you want to sustain within you.
Can you think about any strategies that we could use to kind of ensure that our values are respected in our workplace? What are some of the things that we can do as a staff, like, as a staff member, what can I do?
Having endured extreme grief, depression to the point of not wanting to be here anymore, I went on a journey where I had to find who I am. And that is a really important journey to take so that you don't get, and I do have a book that I've authored with about raw, real stories of 9 resilient women where a loss is only a loss when you get lost in it. And that's talking about grief in such a profound way, where my strategic tip in that is it's okay to take a step back, and it's okay to say no on things. And it's also okay for you to understand the capacity of what you can take on. Like, you can be a leader, but take that back to how you are a mum, a sister, the maternal instincts within you, and also lean into your dads and uncles and granddads and pops, because again, and your DNA lineage, like where are you from? Who are your people? Connecting it back to, don't be, because if we are in a rush, like they say, slow and steady wins the race. We're here to do a job, but we're also here to ensure our mental health and well-being is a-okay to do that job. And if you've shown up after hearing sad news, good on you, because that's how the strength within you to be able to stand up there and be vulnerable and share with someone else, to give them hope that it's okay to let the tears flow, but it's also the capacity in your skills to how you're able to walk forward, not walk before us. It is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So my biggest tip is to be kind to yourself so that you can be kind to others, is pretty much the short end of the story of it, in that.
And I think it's really, for me as well, it's really important to acknowledge that it's actually really okay to have those difficult conversations. It's okay to step up and go, you know what, I understand why this needs to happen, but you need to understand from my perspective how this affects me culturally.
Yes. And love yourself. Be okay with having that self-love for you. It's not selfish. It is because you need to, love heals us. Love doesn't hurt us. There's too much of that connotation on when you have a failed relationship. And that could be a failed relationship in your workplace. That could be a failed relationship in your neighbor. That could be a failed relationship of a former business partner. But do love you and do own that, because love is pretty powerful when we feel our love. And as you know, with our old people, when we see them, the country that they're on, that's love in itself. Like the smiles that you see, they're grounded all the time. Like, yes, we can wear shoes to go in the city because we have to, because I don't want to burn my foot, but feel the country that's under you. Feel the love, truly feel the love.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more question to finish up for the session. What kind of advice would you give to Aboriginal professionals who are just starting their careers in a predominantly Western industry?
Do your research, like not just around where you're working, do your research around the whole footprint around Australia, getting to know the nations, getting to know the number of nations that we have, and the language. Like, I'm not saying learn the language, but getting to know that what happens in the northern part of Australia may not be the same as the southern part of Australia or the western part of Australia. Lean into that, because the consumer that is entering into your health space may not always be someone that is from the country that you are standing on. They may have had to move for whatever reason, but their cultural ties is from somewhere else. And have open conversations with them and be prepared where we all have an ego, but when we don't listen to understand and we only listen to respond because we have a title that I'm a manager or a CEO or a team leader, you need to shift that hat off you and bring it back to the humanity of it.
Aunty Berth, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really lovely listening to you. I love listening to your words and being able to kind of learn from you. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you, beautiful Jamie, for having me. And I hope the listeners out there get something out of listening to today's session. And even this morning's been healing for me, just to talk out loud and share that. So thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank you for tuning in today to the Training Support Unit's Jumbana podcast. I hope the information we shared today helps to support you on your journey working with Aboriginal families and communities. Until next time, Yanu.